morning. Welcome to my morning news. My name's Martin, and I like to look at the news. But I don't like mainstream news, so I'm gonna watch some Timcast, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Showing that 6% of COVID deaths are solely COVID, and 94% of deaths include comorbidities, some 2 or 3 comorbidities.
I've seen this a little bit. I've watched a little bit. I'm restarting it now. I heard about this last night, and this is hilarious because this is what a lot of people have been saying, and what I've been saying for a while too, is that the people who are dying from COVID aren't actually dying from COVID. They're dying from something that they already had. COVID just exacerbates that, and I understand that. Which means the healthy population is subjecting themselves to psychological torture for no reason. And by that, I'm talking about the whole mask issue. Obviously, I'm an anti-masker.
Weird thing about it now is that Twitter is actually censoring people for bringing this up, slightly framed incorrectly, I kid you not. So
Exactly. So 6% of the people who died of COVID died of only COVID. All other deaths had some underlying medical condition.
The first thing I want to show you is the official source. I got several from the Atlanta, the Atlanta Journal Courier. CDC, 94% of coronavirus-related deaths have underlying medical conditions. We've known this.
Yes.
We've known about, the bull wouldn't be surprising. Will ban you.
Yes,
but coronavirus-related deaths in the U.S. have COVID disease control and prevention. Conditions in coronavirus-related deaths include respiratory failure, vascular and unspecified
CDC.
dementia. Okay, wait. And
Okay.
intentional and
Here we go.
unspecified
This is
dementia,
hilarious.
heart failure, renal failure, and intentional and unintentional injury. Okay, wait. Hold on a minute. Intentional injury?
Yes.
What? You mean somebody died because they got attacked and they had COVID at the time, so it was a COVID death?
Yes. Somebody got attacked and died, and they had COVID at the time and didn't even know it, and they got counted as a COVID death. Heck, somebody committed suicide during the lockdown, and they had COVID, and it's counted as a COVID death.
Yep. Unintentional injury? You mean somebody fell down the stairs, but they had COVID, so they called it a COVID death?
Yep, got in a motorcycle accident.
Well, what percentage of the COVID deaths are people falling downstairs?
Or being
Okay,
attacked.
I'm being hyperbolic, but we've heard the stories. We've seen the interviews. This is true. There are people who have died straight up of being
true.
like on a motorcycle crash, and they're like, oh, that COVID death. I can't believe it, but they're actually reporting this. Well, here's what ends up happening. Let me show you the CNN story first. It's funny. Twitter removes QAnon supporters' false claim about coronavirus death stats that Trump had retweeted. Really? Here's what CNN says. Twitter on Sunday took down a tweet containing a false claim about COVID death stats that was made by a supporter of the baseless QAnon conspiracy theory, a post that Trump had retweeted earlier in the day. The tweet, which has been replaced with a message saying this tweet is no longer available because it violated the rules, from Mel Q, copied from someone else's Facebook post, claimed the CDC had quietly updated its numbers to admit that only 6% of people listed as COVID deaths actually died from COVID, since the other 94% had 2 to 3 other serious illnesses. That's not what the CDC said. Hey, wait, what? Didn't I just read the AJC showing us that's literally what they said? They said as of Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, Twitter had not removed a second tweet, also retweeted by the president on Sunday, that spread the same false claim. The second tweet by Trump campaign advisor Jenna Ellis linked to an article on the right-wing website Gateway Pundit that was based on the QAnon supporters' tweet.
If they had just added the word only after COVID in the sentence, actually died from COVID only, then it would have been semantically correct and nobody could have taken it down. But because it doesn't say that only 6% actually died from COVID only. Fucking semantics.
Tweet. CNN has reached out to the White House for comment on Trump's tweets. The CDC's latest regular update to a public stats page on the pandemic. There was nothing especially quiet about it. That's an opinion.
Very
Said
good.
that for 6% of the deaths included in the stats, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned on the deceased person's death certificate. That is not at all the same with saying that only 6% reported actually died from COVID. It simply means that the other 94% were listed as having at least one additional factor contributing to their death. Talk about arguing semantics, right?
Right.
For example, the other 94% includes people whose death certificate listed both COVID and obesity, both COVID and diabetes, both COVID and heart disease, among other conditions.
Okay, so the COVID and obesity thing, that's like, because you could have been otherwise healthy except for obese, so I understand that might not be the best one to say as an underlying condition, but it doesn't hurt. I mean,
Isn't that what they said? People can live with these conditions for years, but if they get infected with COVID, and they could die quickly. The fact that they also had underlying conditions does not mean that COVID was not a major reason or the major reason they died when they did. The CDC did not say that.
Yeah,
That's CNN
exactly.
injecting their opinion and their contextual analysis into what the CDC meant.
and therefore that makes this piece fake news as well. If this piece can say and interject their own opinion into the CDC's information, then why can QAnon not do the same simply because they didn't say only COVID? Why? I don't understand how these guys can take the moral high ground over QAnon and say that they're not fake news. CNN is totally fake news.
That's why I bring up the AJC, because they specifically said just this. According to the CDC, 94% of COVID-related deaths had other underlying medical conditions called comorbidities. 6% listed only COVID as the cause of death. End of story. If CNN wants to do a contextual analysis, they're free to do so, but to act like they're correct and the other person is wrong, that's fake news. I'm just showing you what
Thank
AJC
you.
said.
That's
If that's
just what I
that's
said.
too much for YouTube, by all means, take it down. Here's a story from the Gateway Pundit. CNN and Twitter target President Trump, and the Gateway Pundit won't allow us to share the actual COVID-19 numbers from CDC website that don't fit their narrative. They say last night we posted an article about COVID-19. Shock report. This week, CDC quietly updated COVID-19 numbers. Only 9,210 Americans died from COVID alone. The rest had different or other serious illnesses. That's true. What's wrong about that? It doesn't. They didn't say you won't die. They just said the other had other issues. I don't understand. The gist of the article is that COVID-19 is not nearly as deadly as first projected by the WHO and then by Dr. Fauci and Birx. Based on CDC numbers this past week, only 6% of deaths attributed to COVID were instances where the only factor was COVID. The point they're trying to make in their contextual analysis is that if you do not have a comorbidity, you are you're much less likely to die as a victim of COVID.
Everybody needs
I
an
think
editor
that's a
in these
fair
days.
analysis.
So
You can
many
argue it,
editors, and they
but I don't
still
see why
made
that should be
fucking
taken down.
mistake. That is hilarious. Oh my god. CNN fucking... Who was this article by? Joe Hoft of the Gateway Pundit. Okay. Gotcha.
She said the others, had 2 to 3 other illnesses, and the overwhelming majority were of very advanced age. They say, we used Mel Q's tweet in our report, and the president retweeted Mel Q's tweet. But today, Twitter took down the tweet. They notified Mel that the tweet that used actual CDC data violated their policy on misleading information about COVID. Her account was suspended for posting from 12 hours. So you know what I did? I tweeted basically the same thing, but linked to the CNN article. And my tweet remains up. I think this is very obviously an attack on particular individuals. Probably a bunch of leftists flagged the tweet. Twitter gave in because they don't know or care about context or the truth. But the funny thing is, even though CNN claims it's fake, it's a fake tweet, they literally confirm the same thing, just with a slightly different contextual analysis. They go on to say there is no secret about the fact that pre-existing conditions can cause people to experience more severe problems with COVID. The CDC has long said that older adults and people with underlying health conditions are more likely. It's not a secret. We've known this. Why are they taking it down? The CDC told CNN in July that COVID will end up as a top 10 cause of death for 2020. The final ranking. So look, here's the nitpicking they're doing. CNN is saying they did die from COVID, but they had underlying conditions. Whereas the other group is saying, yes, they did die from other conditions and they had COVID. What do you want me to say? Both are true, I guess. The argument from CNN is you could be obese and live and then get COVID and die. But that argument means that every obese person gets COVID and dies. That's not what's happening. Many people who are obese and get COVID do die. But does every single obese person who gets COVID die? No. In that case, I think CNN's analysis is incorrect. Yes, it plays a role, but I think it's fair to point out if you are a healthy, healthy, average individual with no comorbidities, you're probably going to be fine. See, this is the problem I've been talking about for quite some time, that you're not allowed to engage in any kind of talk that we can solve this problem. So here's the solution here. If what the CDC is saying is true, and I assume it is, then we can start to open up many of our businesses safely and secure.
I don't assume it's true. I assume that they are actually fudging the numbers to make it look as bad as they can so that they can keep shit closed down for as long as they can. And this is the best they can do. How pitiful.
Securely, while protecting those most vulnerable. We can see that regular, people with no comorbidities will be just fine. So long as they're not, relatively old, younger people will be fine. They don't let you talk about it. No. So the only result then is that the general public can only say, lock it down until...
And this isn't just online either that you can't talk about this. I go to work, I go to the store, I go and talk to people out in public, and you cannot talk to people about this. People get very mad. They get very angry. Put on your goddamn mask. You're gonna kill somebody. How am I gonna kill somebody? I don't have COVID. And if I did, I would stay home because I'm not stupid. I don't want to get the public sick. So if I feel any symptoms of sickness, I'm staying home. And I'm going to let my work know the same thing. But you know what? I keep myself healthy and I keep myself in good condition. So I'm not really worried about it. And that's why I won't wear a mask.
We get a vaccine. They might take this video down. Maybe not.
No,
hopefully it stays up.
Take this video
but that's what we
down.
need to do. We need
to
to have real conversations about solving the problem. Well, I'll tell you this. Where I'm at in New Jersey, they've officially opened indoor dining again, finally. I don't know. I guess a lot of businesses are permanently closed forever, and the economies have been ravaged and destroyed. Man, it really does feel like they just squeezed this for all it's worth to hurt Donald Trump. Why? Because it's the Democrat cities and states that did it, not the Republican ones for the most part. And the Republican ones seem to be doing fine. Now, you can argue that these Democrat cities are more dense, so that's fair. That's a fair point. Ultimately, I think it doesn't matter if you believe they did it on purpose because you can't prove any of it. All that matters is they did shut down. It was bad for the economy. They did arrest people for opening businesses, and now their state economies and their local economies are being destroyed, and people are mad about it. So look, if we can't talk about these stories, if you can't even tweet, hey, look what the CDC said because they don't like your opinion on it or your framing, I don't even know what's bannable at this point. And I've said it before. I've talked to Google and I said, listen, I don't know what I can or can't say because your rules make no sense and they're vague. If this is against the rules, but CNN's isn't, you have to. You can't just post the actual link to the CDC. Sure, fine, whatever. But then don't expect people to trust media if that's the case, or trust social media. And don't be surprised when antitrust comes for your big tech platform, dudes. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for hanging out.
Yep. is exactly